The day I finally learned who my real father was, wasn't the day my life changed. It was the day I discovered my best friend had known the truth for weeks and deliberately made sure I never would. The person I trusted more than anyone had stolen something no one could ever give back. My identity. And when I uncovered the reason why, I realized the lie was much bigger than a switched DNA envelope. It involved my mother, her wealthy husband, and a secret someone was willing to protect at any cost. People always tell you that friends are the family you choose. I used to believe that. If anyone had asked me who I trusted the most, I wouldn't have said my mother. I wouldn't have said my boyfriend. I wouldn't even have said myself. I would have said Olivia. We met when we were 11 years old. We survived middle school together. We cried through our first heartbreaks. We stayed awake talking until sunrise before college exams. She knew every secret I'd ever buried. Or at least, I thought she did. My name is Emma. I'm 28 years old. For almost my entire life, one question followed me everywhere. Who is my father? Growing up, I learned not to ask. Every birthday, every Father's Day, every school event where kids brought their dads, I would look at my mother. She always had the same expression, a forced smile. Then she'd quietly change the subject. When I was 7, I asked her if my dad was dead. She hugged me tightly. No. When will I meet him? Maybe someday. That someday never came. At 12, I asked again. She looked exhausted. It's complicated. At 16, she became angry. Stop asking. By college, I stopped bringing it up. Not because I didn't care. Because I realized every question hurt her. And despite everything, I loved my mother. She raised me alone. Worked double shifts. Skipped meals so I never had to. I convinced myself that whatever happened between her and my father, she had her reasons. Life moved on. At least, that's what I tried to believe. Olivia had been there through every stage. Whenever I wondered who I looked like, she'd joke, maybe your dad is secretly a movie star. When I got frustrated, she'd distract me. When I cried, she'd stay until I laughed again. She wasn't just my best friend. She felt like my sister. Our families even celebrated holidays together. My mother loved her. Her parents loved me. There were weekends when people forgot whose house belonged to whom. That was how close we were. Then everything changed because of one birthday gift. My 28th birthday. Olivia walked into my apartment holding a small wrapped box. You'll love this. Inside was a DNA testing kit. One of those ancestry kits everyone seemed to be using. I laughed. You really think this will solve the mystery? She smiled. Maybe. And if it doesn't? At least you'll know more about where you came from. It seemed harmless. Interesting. Maybe even exciting. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to hope. A week later, I mailed the sample. Then forgot about it. Life got busy. Work deadlines. Apartment repairs. Helping my mother move into a smaller place. Weeks passed. Until one afternoon, I received an email. Your DNA results are ready. I froze. My hands actually started shaking. After 28 years, maybe I would finally know. I clicked the link. The website loaded. Then, an error message. Results unavailable. Please contact customer support. I frowned. Weird. I called. The woman sounded confused. Your account shows the results have already been viewed. What? They were accessed 3 days ago. No. I've never opened them. Silence. Then she asked, did anyone else have access to your account? I thought about it. No. Only me. Or so I believed. Customer service reset my account. They said they'd investigate. I waited another 2 days. Finally, the results appeared. I opened them immediately. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. Ethnicity estimates. Family matches. Then, a close biological relative. Half-sibling. 99.8% certainty. I stopped breathing. Half-sibling? How? I clicked the profile. Male. 34 years old. His name was Daniel. I had never heard of him. He had sent a message. If you're seeing this, I think we're related. I've been looking for you for years. Years? What did he mean years? I read the message 5 times. Then another one. Our father passed away last year. Before he died, he admitted he had another daughter. He regretted never meeting you. I've been trying to find you ever since. The room started spinning. Father. Passed away. Another daughter. Everything I'd believed collapsed in seconds. I called my mother immediately. No answer. Again. Nothing. Again. Straight to voicemail. I left work early. Drove directly to her apartment. She looked surprised when she opened the door. Emma? I held up my phone. Who is he? She went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. I showed her Daniel's message. She stared at it. Didn't speak. Then, she quietly sat down. For almost a full minute, neither of us said anything. Finally, she whispered, I hoped you'd never find out like this. Tears filled her eyes. I wanted to tell you. When I was ready. I've waited 28 years. She covered her face. I was 19. He was engaged. I didn't know. When I found out, I left. So he knew. No, he never knew. My stomach twisted. But his son says. She nodded slowly. He found out much later. Years later. He had searched for me. Too late. Far too late. I didn't know what to feel. Relief? Anger? Grief? I had spent decades imagining a man who never cared. Now I learned. He had cared. Eventually. But someone had stolen all that time from both of us. That night, Olivia came over. I told her everything. She hugged me tightly. I'm so sorry. We cried together. At least, I thought we did. Looking back now, something was strange. She wasn't surprised. Not really. At the time, I blamed shock. Now, I know better. A few days later, Daniel and I arranged our first phone call. He sounded nervous. So, I guess you're really my sister. I laughed through tears. I guess I am. He told me stories. About our father. His favorite music. The way he laughed. The same bad jokes. His habit of collecting old watches. Every story felt like someone handing me tiny missing pieces of myself. For the first time, I heard about someone whose smile looked exactly like mine. Whose stubbornness matched mine. Who loved books the way I did. It was beautiful. And heartbreaking. Then Daniel said something. That changed everything. I almost gave up looking. What do you mean? I thought you didn't want to meet us. What? There was a woman. A woman. She contacted me after I posted online. My heart skipped. What woman? She said she was your friend. She told me you'd already seen the DNA results. She said, you wanted nothing to do with our family. Every muscle in my body froze. A friend? Only one person even knew I had ordered the DNA kit. Only one person knew I was searching. Only one person could have recognized Daniel's name if she saw it. Olivia. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was impossible. There has to be some mistake. Daniel hesitated. I wish there was. I still have her emails. And Emma. She signed them with her real name. He slowly read it aloud. Olivia Carter. The room went completely silent. I stared at the wall, unable to breathe. The woman I trusted more than anyone had contacted my own family behind my back. And whatever she was hiding, it was big enough that she tried to erase me from my own father's story. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about those missing DNA reports. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was the laboratory calling back with good news. Instead, it was Emily. She kept texting me like nothing had happened. Did you tell your mom yet? When are the results coming? I'm so nervous for you. Reading her messages suddenly felt different. A week earlier, I would have believed every word. Now, every sentence felt rehearsed. Every smile she sent through emojis felt fake. I decided not to tell her anything. Not until I knew the truth. 3 days later, the laboratory called. The receptionist sounded apologetic. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We investigated the situation." My heart immediately started racing. "And? There was a request to reprint your report." "What?" The original report was accessed shortly after it was completed. My fingers tightened around my phone. "Who accessed it?" "I'm afraid I can't legally provide that information." My stomach dropped. "So somebody actually opened my report?" "Yes." "And the original is gone?" "I'm very sorry." The call ended. I just sat there in silence. Someone had opened my DNA report. Someone had printed another copy. Someone had taken the original. That wasn't an accident anymore. That was intentional. That evening I drove straight to Emily's apartment. I didn't tell her I was coming. She answered the door wearing sweatpants and an oversized hoodie. For a second she looked genuinely surprised. Then she smiled. "Claire, I was just thinking about you." I forced a smile. I wanted to talk. She stepped aside. "Of course." Her apartment looked exactly the same. Everything was perfectly organized. Fresh flowers. Candles burning. Soft music playing. Emily always knew how to create comfort. Maybe that was why nobody ever questioned her. We sat down with coffee. She leaned forward. "So, any news?" I looked directly into her eyes. "The lab says someone accessed my DNA report." For the first time. Her smile disappeared. Only for a second. Then it returned. "Oh wow." She blinked slowly. "That's strange." I nodded. "Very strange." Silence filled the room. I watched her carefully. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Instead, she kept stirring her coffee. Over and over. Long after the sugar had dissolved. "You know," I said quietly, "if someone switched those reports." Emily laughed. It sounded forced. "Claire, who would even do something like that?" "I don't know." She shrugged. "Maybe the lab made a mistake. But they said someone accessed it. I'm sure there's an explanation." There it was. Too calm. Too controlled. Most people would have been shocked. Emily sounded prepared. When I left her apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that she already knew more than she admitted. But feelings weren't proof. I needed evidence. The next morning, I hired a private investigator. His name was David. Gray hair. Calm voice. The kind of man who noticed details everyone else ignored. After listening to everything, he leaned back. "So, you think your best friend switched your DNA results?" "I don't know. I just know something isn't right." He nodded. "I'll look into it." 2 weeks passed. Nothing. No updates. No breakthroughs. Then one rainy Thursday afternoon, David called. "I found something." I drove to his office immediately. He handed me a folder. "Your friend visited the laboratory." I stared at him. "What?" "Security records confirm it." My heart stopped. "When?" "The morning after your DNA sample arrived." I could barely breathe. Why would she go there? I don't know. But she signed in. He slid another paper toward me. "There's more." Emily hadn't gone alone. She had gone with a man. An older man. Late 50s. Dark hair. Blue eyes. I stared at the security photo. Something about him looked familiar. Very familiar. I couldn't figure out why. David noticed my expression. "You recognize him?" I don't know. But I've seen him before." He nodded. "I thought so too." He opened another file. "The man's name is Richard Lawson." The moment I heard that name, everything inside me froze. Richard Lawson. That was the CEO of Lawson Construction. One of the biggest companies in the state. But why would he be at a DNA lab? And why? With Emily? None of it made sense. That night I searched his interviews online. Business magazines. Television appearances. Award ceremonies. The more I watched, the stranger it became. His smile. His eyes. His laugh. Something about him felt painfully familiar. Then I opened an old family photo. My mother's college graduation. There, standing behind her, was the same man, only younger. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Richard Lawson knew my mother. Decades ago. My hands started shaking. I immediately called Mom. Mom, did you know Richard Lawson? Silence. Long silence. Finally, she answered. Why are you asking? You knew him. Another pause. Claire, answer me. Her breathing became uneven. We were friends. Friends. That single word felt like another lie. Just friends? She didn't answer. My heart sank. The next day I drove to her house. She looked exhausted before I even said a word. She already knew why I was there. We sat in the kitchen. Neither of us spoke. Finally, I placed the photo on the table. You knew him. She looked down, then quietly nodded. Yes. For how long? Years. Were you together? Tears filled her eyes. It was a long time ago. I could barely speak. Mom, is Richard Lawson my father? She covered her face with both hands. I don't know. That answer hurt even more. You don't know. I never wanted to find out. I stared at her in disbelief. What? When I became pregnant, I was seeing both Richard and your father. The room started spinning. I truly didn't know. Everything I believed about my family suddenly cracked. But Dad, he always believed I was his. She nodded. He loved you from the first day. So why hide this? She whispered. Because love was more important than biology. I wanted to understand. I really did. But none of this explained Emily. None of it explained the missing DNA report. That evening David called again. I found another connection. What? Emily has been working for Lawson Construction. I frowned. No. She works for a marketing company. Not anymore. What? 6 months ago she accepted a consulting contract. Everything suddenly felt colder. Emily worked for Richard Lawson, the same man who might be my biological father. This couldn't be coincidence. The next morning I confronted Emily. I didn't call. I didn't text. I simply walked into her office. She looked stunned. Claire. I placed the investigator's photos on her desk. You went to the DNA lab. Her face lost all color. You work for Richard Lawson. She stared at the papers. Still silent. You knew. Finally. She whispered. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. Tears filled her eyes. I was trying to protect someone. Who? She closed her eyes. Then quietly answered. Richard. I felt like someone punched the air out of my lungs. You knew he could be my father. She nodded. I found out months ago. You knew. Before I even took the DNA test? She nodded again. I couldn't believe it. For months. She had smiled. Laughed with me. Comforted me. All while hiding the biggest secret of my life. Why? I finally whispered. Why would you do this? Emily looked completely broken. Because Richard begged me. He said revealing the truth would destroy everything. What everything? His family. His company. His marriage. She looked down. He promised he'd tell you himself. I laughed bitterly. When? After stealing my DNA results? She started crying. I thought I was helping. Helping? She had destroyed years of trust. I stood up. Our friendship is over. Claire. No. You don't get to explain anymore. You made your choice. I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard her crying. But for the first time, it didn't change my mind. Because the biggest betrayal wasn't just that Emily lied. It was that someone else had been pulling the strings all along. And now, I was finally going to meet the man who had spent my entire life hiding from the truth. I drove for almost an hour without knowing where I was going. The roads blurred together. Traffic lights changed from red to green. People walked past my car. Life continued as if nothing had happened. But inside my head, everything had changed. For 20 years, I believed my biggest question was who my father was. Now I had a different question. How many people had known the truth? While smiling to my face. That night, I barely slept. Every memory with Olivia replayed in my mind. The sleepovers, the birthday parties, the late-night phone calls, the times she told me everything would be okay. Had any of it been real? Or had she been carrying this secret all along? At 3 in the morning, I got out of bed. I opened the old box where I kept childhood photos. There was one picture of Olivia and me at 12 years old. We were covered in birthday cake, laughing so hard neither of us could look at the camera. I held the picture for several minutes, then quietly placed it back. Some memories deserve to stay beautiful, even if the people in them had changed. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Daniel, my half-brother. Hey. His voice sounded careful. I heard from Richard. I immediately stopped walking. He called you. Yes. What did he say? He wants to meet you. I laughed without humor. Now, after 28 years? Daniel sighed. I know, but I think you should hear him. I looked out the office window. I don't know if I'm ready. You don't have to forgive him. You don't even have to like him. But don't spend the rest of your life wondering what he would have said. His words stayed with me long after the call ended. 3 days later, I agreed. The meeting was arranged at a quiet cafe outside the city, somewhere neither of us was likely to be recognized. I arrived 15 minutes early, not because I was eager, because I was nervous. I ordered coffee I never touched. Every time the cafe door opened, my heart jumped. Then, at exactly 2 o'clock, he walked in. Richard Lawson, the man whose face I'd seen in magazines, business interviews, award ceremonies. Now, he looked nothing like the confident CEO. He looked tired, older, almost fragile. When our eyes met, he stopped walking. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Finally, he smiled, very softly. You have your mother's eyes. I looked at him, and apparently, I have yours too. He sat across from me. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his coffee. I've imagined this moment for years. I folded my arms. I haven't. That smile disappeared. I suppose I deserve that. Neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy. 20 years of unanswered questions sat between us. Finally, he broke it. I didn't know about you. I stared into his eyes. My mother told me that. It's true. I found out only 18 months ago. How? His shoulders dropped. A letter. What letter? Your grandmother. I blinked. My grandmother? He nodded. She wrote to me after she became ill. She wanted me to know. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Why didn't she tell me? Because. He swallowed hard. She wanted proof first. He reached into his briefcase, carefully removed an old envelope. The paper had yellowed with age. My grandmother's handwriting covered the front. Richard gently slid it toward me. I've carried this everywhere. I slowly opened it. Inside was a letter dated almost 2 years earlier. Grandma explained everything. She had always suspected Richard might be my biological father, but she refused to accuse anyone without certainty. When consumer DNA testing became popular, she encouraged Richard to take one. Quietly, privately, without telling anyone. He did. The results confirmed. There was an extremely high probability that he was my biological father. I stared at the page. Grandma had known. Before anyone else. Richard looked down at the table. I wanted to meet you immediately. What stopped you? His answer came almost instantly. Fear. I nodded slowly. Fear of what? Losing everything. There it was. The truth. My wife didn't know. My board of directors didn't know. My investors didn't know. My reputation. My family. I thought if it became public, everything I'd built would collapse. I looked at him carefully. So, you chose your reputation over your daughter. His face filled with regret. No, I chose cowardice. For the first time. He didn't make excuses. He didn't blame circumstances. He blamed himself. I asked Olivia for help. Those words hit me harder than I expected. You admit it? He nodded. I hired her company for consulting. She learned who you were. When she realized, she came to me. My stomach turned. What exactly did you ask her to do? I asked her to delay things. Delay? I wasn't ready. I laughed bitterly. So she switched my DNA results. His face immediately changed. What? I never asked for that. I leaned forward. She contacted my brother. She told him I wanted nothing to do with my father's family. He looked genuinely shocked. I swear, I never knew that. For the first time, I believed him. His mistakes were enormous. But this surprise couldn't be faked. I only asked for time, he whispered. I never asked her to lie. I remained silent. Because suddenly, something wasn't adding up. If Richard hadn't ordered Olivia to interfere, then why had she gone so far? Why risk everything? Unless she had her own reason. That evening, David, the private investigator, called again. I found financial records. What kind? Richard paid Olivia. I know. No, you don't understand. The payments weren't consulting fees. I frowned. What were they? They were personal transfers. Large ones. Over several months. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. My heart skipped. What? It looks like she was being paid directly. For what? I don't know. But there's more. He hesitated. Olivia recently purchased a new house. A luxury SUV. And paid off all her student loans. None of that made sense. Her consulting job couldn't explain that kind of money. I drove straight to Olivia's house. This time, she didn't answer immediately. When she finally opened the door, her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. You shouldn't be here. I have one question. She looked exhausted. What? How much? She froze. What? How much did he pay you? Silence. Then, she whispered. You think I sold our friendship? I know you did. Tears rolled down her cheeks. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. So tell me. Finally, she answered. $500,000. The number echoed inside my head. $500,000. Our 20-year friendship had a price. She broke down crying. I was drowning. My father needed surgery. My family was losing the house. I didn't know what to do. So you sold me? I convinced myself. I was protecting everyone. You, Richard, my parents. I kept telling myself. It was only temporary. I stared at her. Temporary? You stole months of my life. You stole my chance to know my father. You lied to my brother. You lied to me. She couldn't even look at me. Then she said something I never expected. It wasn't just Richard. I frowned. What do you mean? She slowly lifted her head. There was someone else. Someone who wanted the truth buried even more than Richard did. Who? Her lips trembled. Richard's wife. The room went completely silent. She knew. Olivia nodded. She found out before you did. And she promised me. If I made sure you disappeared quietly, she'd make sure I never had to worry about money again. I felt the air leave my lungs. This had never been just about protecting a reputation. Someone had been willing to buy my silence. And now, I finally knew where the money came from. But the biggest betrayal was still waiting. Because Olivia hadn't told me the worst part yet. She looked directly into my eyes and whispered, Claire, your mother knows about the money. For several long seconds, I couldn't speak. Olivia's final words echoed inside my head. Your mother knows about the money. I stared at her, waiting for her to tell me it was another lie. She didn't. Instead, she lowered her eyes. The silence between us felt heavier than anything she could have said. Finally, I found my voice. What did you just say? She wiped away another tear. Your mom knew. I shook my head. No, she wouldn't. Olivia interrupted me softly. She didn't know everything. But she knew Richard contacted me. And she knew he offered money to delay the truth. I took a step backward. So she helped. Olivia looked miserable. Not exactly. Then explain. She walked over to the kitchen table and pulled out an old folder. I've wanted to tell you the truth for months. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were printed emails, bank records, text messages. She handed me the first page. The sender was Richard. The subject line simply read, "We need more time." The message was short. "Please convince Claire to wait a little longer. I need time to tell my family before the DNA results become public." Below that, Olivia had replied, "I'll handle it." My chest tightened. There it was. Proof. Not speculation. Not rumors. Real evidence. I flipped to the next page. Another email. This one was from Richard's wife, Victoria. "If this situation disappears quietly, everyone benefits. No interviews. No legal claims. No public drama. We'll make sure you're taken care of." I looked up. "You accepted this?" Olivia nodded. "I thought delaying everything would protect everyone." I laughed bitterly. Everyone except me. She couldn't argue with that. Because it was true. I drove straight to my mother's house. She opened the door before I even knocked. Almost as if she'd been expecting me. One look at my face. And she knew. "You talked to Olivia." I nodded. "You knew." She stepped aside silently. We sat in the living room where she'd raised me. The same room where she'd bandaged scraped knees. Helped with homework. Held me when I cried. Today, it felt unfamiliar. "I need the truth." She closed her eyes. "You deserve it." For the first time in years. She didn't avoid my questions. She answered every one. "When Richard contacted me, I told him to meet you immediately. He said he needed time." I believed him. "And Olivia?" "I told her to stay out of it. She promised me she would." "So you didn't know she switched the reports?" "No. I swear." I searched her face. Every expression. Every movement. She looked heartbroken. Not defensive. Heartbroken. "I found out much later." "When?" "The day you received your real results." "Why didn't you tell me?" She looked down. "Because I was ashamed." "Ashamed of what?" "Everything." She wiped away tears. "I spent 28 years trying to protect you. And in the end, I failed." Those words hurt more than I expected. Because I believed her. She had made mistakes. Many of them. But this wasn't the lie I'd imagined. "I should have told you the truth years ago," she whispered. I kept waiting for the perfect moment. But perfect moments never come. She looked directly at me. So the silence just grew bigger. I reached across the table. Not because everything was forgiven, but because for the first time, she wasn't hiding. She took my hand. "I'm sorry." Real sorrow. Without excuses. Without blaming anyone else. That evening, I called Daniel. "We need to meet." The next afternoon, the three of us sat together. Me, Daniel, Richard. No lawyers. No assistants. No reporters. Just family. Or whatever we were becoming. Richard looked exhausted. "I've spent my whole life building a company." He smiled sadly. "And almost destroyed my family trying to protect it." Daniel nodded. "You should have trusted us." "I know. I was afraid." Fear. That single word had caused decades of pain. I placed Olivia's emails on the table. Richard read them slowly. Then he looked up in disbelief. "I never authorized this." "I believe you." He frowned. "But the money." "I only approved consulting payments." He turned another page. Then another. His expression changed. "This account. I don't recognize it." Daniel leaned closer. "It's Victoria's." Richard looked stunned. "My wife." He immediately stood up. "I have to go." "Richard." I stopped him. "No more secrets." He slowly nodded. "No more." 3 days later, every major newspaper carried the same headline. Lawson CEO announces retirement. The article explained that Richard was stepping down to focus on personal matters. No scandals. No accusations. Just one simple sentence. Family deserves honesty before success. I smiled sadly. It had taken him nearly 30 years. But at least, he had finally learned. A week later, Richard invited Daniel and me to his home. Not the mansion shown in magazines. A small lake house. Quiet. Private. Victoria wasn't there. Neither were reporters. Only old family photo albums. He placed them on the table. I want you to know who your father really was. He pointed at faded photographs. This was my first fishing trip. This was college. This was the day Daniel was born. Then, he smiled. I wish there were pictures with you. I looked at him. So do I. Hours passed. We laughed. Shared stories. Asked difficult questions. Some answers hurt. Others healed. For the first time, it felt like we weren't strangers anymore. We were simply people trying to recover lost time. Meanwhile, Olivia disappeared completely. She resigned from her job, sold the new house, closed her social media accounts. No one seemed to know where she went. Part of me felt angry. Another part just felt sad. Because one terrible decision had destroyed 20 years of friendship. Almost 2 months later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. No return address. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Olivia. Inside was a single page. Claire, I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope one day you'll believe that I truly loved you as a friend. Fear made me choose money instead of loyalty. That mistake will follow me for the rest of my life. I'm returning every dollar I received. Half has already been donated to children's DNA research. The rest belongs to you. I quietly folded the letter, then placed it back inside the envelope. The money didn't matter anymore. Nothing could buy back trust. A month later, Richard called again. I've made another decision. What is it? I've established a foundation. What kind? One that provides free DNA testing and family search assistance for adopted children and people searching for lost relatives. I smiled. Why? He looked out across the lake. Because nobody should lose 28 years simply because adults were afraid of the truth. For the first time, I saw the man he could have been all along. Not perfect, but finally honest. Still, one final conversation remained. Victoria requested to meet. The woman who had tried hardest to keep me out of their lives. The woman whose fear had nearly erased me forever. She had one chance to explain herself, and I wasn't sure I wanted to hear it. I almost declined Victoria's request. For days, her message sat unanswered in my inbox. Please give me 30 minutes. After that, you'll never hear from me again. I had every reason to ignore her. She had tried to keep me away from my own father. She had helped create the biggest lie of my life. What could she possibly say that would change any of it? But Daniel said something that stayed with me. You've spent your whole life searching for answers. Don't stop now. So I agreed. We met in a quiet botanical garden just outside the city. It was early morning. The paths were nearly empty. Victoria was already sitting on a bench when I arrived. She looked nothing like the elegant woman I'd seen in magazine photos. No designer clothes. No makeup. No expensive jewelry. Just a tired woman holding a cup of coffee with both hands. When she saw me, she stood. Thank you for coming. I nodded politely. You have 30 minutes. She smiled sadly. I probably deserve less. For a while, neither of us spoke. Birds chirped somewhere above us. A gardener quietly watered flowers nearby. Finally, Victoria took a deep breath. I owe you the truth. I folded my arms. I'm listening. She looked down at her hands. When Richard told me about you, I panicked. I wasn't angry because you existed. I was terrified because I thought my family would fall apart. She paused. My father left when I was 12. My mother never recovered. I promised myself my children would never experience that kind of pain. I stayed silent. She continued. So when I learned about you, I made the worst decision of my life. I believed hiding the truth would protect everyone. She looked up, tears filling her eyes. But lies don't protect families. They only delay the pain. I never hated you, she whispered. I hated what your existence forced me to face. I frowned. What do you mean? She gave a sad smile. It forced me to admit that my marriage wasn't as perfect as I wanted everyone to believe. That sentence stayed with me. Sometimes, people don't hide the truth because they're evil. Sometimes, they're simply afraid. That didn't excuse what she'd done, but it helped me understand it. Victoria reached into her handbag. She handed me a small wooden box. I've kept this for almost 2 years. Inside was a silver pocket watch. Old, beautiful. Its cover was engraved with tiny initials. RL. Richard bought this the week he found out about you. I looked at her. He wanted to give it to you when you met. He never had the courage. I carefully closed the box. I'll make sure he gives it to me himself. She smiled through tears. I think he'd like that. Before leaving, Victoria said one last thing. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I answered honestly. Forgiveness isn't something you ask for once. It's something you earn over time. She nodded. I understand. Then she quietly walked away. I never saw her again. Over the next several months, life slowly settled into something that almost felt normal. Richard and I began meeting every Sunday, not to talk about the past, but to build something new. We cooked together, watched old movies, argued about baseball teams. Sometimes we talked for hours. Other times, we simply sat on his porch drinking coffee. Neither of us tried to make up for 28 lost years, because we couldn't. Instead, we focused on making the years ahead count. Daniel quickly became more than just a DNA match. He became the older brother I'd always imagined. He teased me endlessly, called every Friday, showed up whenever something broke in my apartment. One afternoon, while helping me build a bookshelf, he laughed. You know, Dad would have been terrible at this. I smiled. How do you know? He couldn't even assemble a kitchen chair. We both laughed. For the first time, those stories didn't make me sad. They made me feel connected. One evening, Richard invited both of us to dinner. Halfway through the meal, he disappeared into his study. When he returned, he was carrying the same wooden box Victoria had shown me. He placed it in front of me. I've wanted to give you this for a long time. I opened it. The silver pocket watch reflected the warm light above the table. He looked nervous. I bought it because I imagined one day handing it to my daughter. His voice cracked. I just never imagined it would take nearly 30 years. I smiled gently. You still made it. He wiped away a tear. Barely. Several weeks later, I received another letter. This one wasn't from Olivia. It was from the DNA company. They explained that after completing their internal investigation, they had strengthened their security procedures to prevent another case like mine. Enclosed was something unexpected. A handwritten note from the customer service representative who had first taken my call. Because of your courage in reporting what happened, future families will be better protected. Sometimes, doing the right thing helps people you'll never meet. As for Olivia, almost a year passed before I heard from her again. She never asked to meet, never asked for another chance. Instead, she sent one final message. I volunteer every weekend helping people reconnect with lost relatives. It's the closest thing I can do to making things right. Take care of yourself, Claire. That was it. No excuses. No expectations. Just goodbye. I stared at the message for a long time, then quietly deleted it. Some chapters deserve an ending, not a sequel. Exactly 1 year after receiving my DNA results, Richard organized a small family picnic. Nothing extravagant. Just sandwiches, homemade pie, children running across the grass, Daniel's wife, his little twins, a few close relatives. As the afternoon sun began to set, Richard stood and raised a glass. I'd like to say something. Everyone became quiet. He looked directly at me. I spent too much of my life believing success meant protecting my image. He smiled sadly. I was wrong. Success means having the courage to face the truth, even when it's painful. Then he looked at everyone around the table. This family isn't perfect. It never will be. But from today forward, it will be honest. Everyone lifted their glasses, including me. Later that evening, Daniel walked beside me as we watched the children play. You know, you look happier. I smiled. I am. Because you found your father? I thought about it, then shook my head. No, because I finally found myself. For so many years, I'd believed my identity depended on a name, a DNA result, a missing parent. Now I understood something different. The truth didn't change who I was. It simply explained where I came from, who I became. That had always been my choice. Sometimes people ask if I regret taking that DNA test. The answer is simple. Not for a second. Yes, it exposed lies. It ended a lifelong friendship. It shattered the image of several people I loved. But it also gave me a brother, a father willing to change. And something even more valuable, freedom from wondering. Because unanswered questions have a way of following you forever. The truth can hurt. It can change everything. It can even break your heart. But living inside a lie slowly breaks something even deeper. Looking back now, I don't remember the money. I don't remember the lawsuits that never happened. I don't even remember the headlines about Richard's retirement. I remember one simple moment. A father nervously handing his daughter an old silver pocket watch. Not because it erased 28 years, but because it proved something important. It is never too late to choose honesty. It is never too late to accept responsibility. And sometimes, the family you were denied can still become the family you deserve. If only someone has the courage to finally tell the truth. Moral of the story. The truth may arrive late, but it is always stronger than the lies built to hide it. Betrayal can destroy trust in a moment, yet honesty, accountability, and the courage to face difficult truths are the only foundations on which real relationships can be rebuilt.